Hello and welcome to The Take with Sophy Ridge, live at 9 here in the heart of Westminster. Well, British politics is known for being brutal. When your time's up in number 10, the removal vans turn up and the next Prime Minister arrives shortly after. We're not quite at that point yet, but today really summed up the huge change about to take place. Boris Johnson faced his last Prime Minister's questions, leaving by saying it was mission largely accomplished. And a few hours ago, we found out who will replace him in just over 6 weeks' time.
Therefore, Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss will be the candidates going forward to a final ballot of Conservative Party members.
So it's Rishi Sunak versus Liz Truss. Now Conservative Party members will decide which one becomes our next Prime Minister at the start of September.
Who is the best person to defeat Keir Starmer and the Labour Party at the next election? I believe I'm the only candidate who can do that.
Well, the former Chancellor topped the final ballot with 137 votes from his colleagues, followed by Liz Truss, Foreign Secretary, on 113.
I can hit the ground running and I can get things done. And I think that's what colleagues have voted for, and that's what I now want to take to Conservative members around the country.
Well, meanwhile, a few hours before we got that leadership contest result, the current Prime Minister was ending his very last Prime Minister's questions.
I want to thank everybody here and hasta la vista, baby. Thank you.
Hasta la vista. So the changing of the guard at the top of British politics and government is well underway. We'll try and find out what Conservative voters think of the choice the party now faces between the final two. We're going to be asking our special panel of Conservative voters to try and get their sense on the final two. Looking forward to speaking to you later on. And we'll also have some top guests for you, including the former Conservative Party leader and Liz Truss supporter Iain Duncan Smith, the Environment Minister Victoria Prentis from the Rishi Sunak camp. Plus, we'll also see what Labour makes of it all with the party's Deputy Leader Angela Rayner, plus much more besides on The Take. So, and then there were two. Either Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss will be the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Conservative MPs decided to eliminate Penny Mordaunt in the final ballot earlier, and now, of course, it is over to the members. They will decide who takes over on September the 5th from Boris Johnson. Well, he said, hasta la vista, baby, as he signed off from his final Prime Minister's questions in classic Boris Johnson style. Well, let's crack on, shall we, and start with a quick recap of another extraordinary day.
Therefore, Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss will be the candidates going forward to a final ballot of Conservative Party members. Thank you very much.
Well, there it is, the result. It was going to be Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss who will go through to the final stage of the contest. The two candidates and Tory party members are now going to vote on who to be the next Prime Minister.
The question now for our members is, who is the best person to defeat Keir Starmer and the Labour Party at the next election? I believe I'm the only candidate who can do that.
I'm the person who can go into number 10, I can hit the ground running and I can get things done. And I think that's what colleagues have voted for, and that's what I now want to take to Conservative members around the country.
Mr. Speaker, as you rightly say, last week I told the House that this was possibly, that last week was possibly my last PMQs. This week, Mr. Speaker, probably, certainly will be my last PMQs from this dispatch box, or any other dispatch box. I'm not following this thing particularly closely, but my impression is that there's been quite a lot of debate already.
Does the Prime Minister agree with his former Chancellor that plans put forward by the other candidates are, in his words, I've got them here, nothing more than the fantasy economics of unfunded spending promises?
Well, Mr. Speaker, they know all about fantasy economics. He's just a great pointless human bollard, Mr. Speaker. That's what he is.
I think the message coming out of this leadership contest is pretty clear. They got us into this mess, and they've no idea how to get us out of it.
Hasta la vista, baby. Thank you.
notice what Theresa May at the end there, reluctantly standing up, no applause. Well, we're going to speak to Conservatives backing each of the two contenders this evening. To start with, we're going to talk to a Rishi Sunak supporter, and that is Victoria Prentis, the Environment Minister. Thank you so much for being with us.
Hello, Sophie.
You're going to miss Boris Johnson? I saw you laughing along to that montage.
He was on form today. He really was. He is a great performer in the Commons. He's been a great performer in the country too, and I think we will all remember him with a certain amount of affection.
Now, I want to talk to you about Rishi Sunak, who, of course, you are backing. It feels like until now he's been the front runner. You know, he's been comfortably ahead with the MPs, but now, of course, it goes to Conservative Party members. And it's a bit of a different story, isn't it? According to all of the polling, Liz Truss is ahead when it comes to the members' voting.
Well, the polling is, I think, very difficult to read because, of course, nobody knows who our members are or where our members are. So they're a notoriously difficult bunch to identify and then to poll.
Managed to poll 800 of them voters.
It's quite easy, yes, but that's not really a great poll size. I think it's very hard to tell who starts foremost in the members' minds. They've got time to make up their minds. They're quite a sophisticated electorate. They've done this several times before. In recent years, they've done it quite a lot. I'm meeting with my members in my constituency tomorrow evening to chat through the pluses and minuses of both candidates, and I suspect MPs up and down the country will be doing that.
At the same time, it feels like even Rishi Sunak himself admits that he's the underdog. He said, do we start from behind? Yes, we do, in a video released on Twitter today.
We certainly did a few weeks ago. I think it was not envisaged that our campaign would have gone as well as it has. So I think Rishi is right to recognise that we've made real progress over the last few weeks. I think he's performed very well, both in the private hustings that we've had in Parliament, and we've had loads of those, and also in the more public telly hustings. So I think, so far, my perspective is we're running a good campaign. Rishi's real values of decency, honesty, hard work, real ability and focus on the evidence are coming through, and I think our members will notice that.
It's interesting, isn't it, the tone of the leadership campaign. You know, we heard Keir Starmer there just plucking at what the candidates are saying about each other and throwing them straight back at Boris Johnson. Does the Prime Minister agree with Rishi Sunak that the plans put forward by his rivals are nothing more than the fantasy economics of unfunded spending promises? I mean, it's not helpful, is it, this kind of thing from the former Chancellor?
I think we've always been a really broad church in the Conservative Party, and I think grown-up debate about policy is fine, actually.
Fantasy economics?
It was a debate, and Rishi was getting his point across. I think what has been less helpful is the very nasty sort of personal smearing that seems to have gone on, but I never know how much of that is real and how much is made up. But I think what's very important from our point of view is that we are here to run a positive campaign. We're going to be telling our voting public why Rishi would make a really good Prime Minister and all about his good qualities, and I think that's the way to do it.
You say you want to run a positive campaign. Rishi Sunak's also tweeted to say today in a video, who is the best person to beat Keir Starmer and the Labour Party at the next election? I believe I am the only candidate who can do that. So do you think Liz Truss could win an election?
I think Rishi is the best candidate for winning an election, and that's why I'm backing him.
Well, of course, he's the only candidate.
Well, he's running for leader. It's perfectly proper for him to think and believe in himself, and I think that's the right way to be. I have a lot of respect for Liz too. In fact, I have a lot of respect to all of those candidates that put themselves forward for the leadership. It's a really brave thing to do, and golly, politics is brutal. I walked through the lobby with Penny Mordaunt almost immediately after she came third today, and she was there in public with all her colleagues, most of whom had voted for other people, and it's a funny old world.
Yeah, it certainly is. It does feel like it's moving at breakneck speed at the minute. As well. I've been doing some interviews as well with people earlier, and two other people who backed Rishi Sunak were talking about Liz Truss's policy agenda. She says she wants a bold new economic policy. And both Liam Fox and Mark Harper said to me that, look, if she strays too far from the 2019 manifesto that, of course, you were elected on, then maybe it's right to start looking at a new mandate, i.e. another election.
I'm really not keen on having another election. I think it's very important that we have a period of stability and calm now. We've had a heck of a time since the 2019 election. We've obviously had the COVID pandemic. We've got war in Europe now. We are now facing some really big challenges in my own brief with the cost of living and the cost of food, for example. We got news on inflation today. I really want a period of calm, quiet, careful, evidence-led government, delivery-focused, just making sure that we get our policies out there, we perform in a way that people need us to do, and we give people help where they need us.
So not straying too far from the last manifesto?
Well, we were elected on a manifesto. We haven't really had much of a chance to put many of those policies into action because of the pandemic and then the war. So it is really important, I think, that we come back together as a party. And I felt that today in PMQs. I felt, as we said goodbye to Boris in the chamber, I felt real unity and sort of a sense of purpose back in the party. Almost when we won that election and we were elected on that manifesto. So I think it's important that we do get on with the business of governing.
OK, thank you very much indeed, Victoria Prentis. There. Well, the place that both Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, of course, want to end up on the 5th of September is number 10 Downing Street. So let's go there, shall we? Because our chief political correspondent, John Craig, is there with us. Now, he's seen a few of these contests down the years. So, John, put it into context for us. There's been lots of discussion, hasn't there, about how nasty this fight has been. Do we all need to realise that this is always how politics is, or do you think it is actually quite bitter this year?
Skullduggery, black arts, dirty tricks, they're nothing new. I think perhaps some politicians are a bit more woke and sensitive than they used to be. In 1990, which was the first Tory leadership election I covered, where after Margaret Thatcher was toppled, John Major famously retreated to his Huntingdon constituency, claiming that a wisdom tooth operation had left him in great pain, and that prevented him from endorsing Margaret Thatcher. Now, he later revealed in his memoirs that not only that, not only did he sign a nomination paper for Margaret Thatcher had she gone into the second round, he actually gave Geoffrey Archer's driver, who was taking them back to London, his own nomination papers, and of course he entered the race and saw off Michael Heseltine and Douglas Hurd. Then in 1995, when Mr Major was challenged by John Redwood, I remember being in the garden for his put up or shut up news conference, Michael Portillo professed loyalty to John Major. At the same time, he was having 40 phone lines put in at a house in Lord North Street, the days before mobile phones were as commonplace as they are now, and planning to enter the second round. Incidentally, it was the same house in Lord North Street that Liz Truss is using this time. Then in 2005, David Davis this week has been complaining about what he calls relocating of votes. Well, that's a bit rich, many would say, because in 2005, it was claimed with some authority that David Cameron's team, led by George Osborne, lent David Davis votes because Mr Cameron didn't want to face Liam Fox because he regarded him as a better performer in hustings. I have to say, though, the most blatant, flagrant acts of treachery we've seen, I think, in any of the last few elections, got to be Michael Gove stabbing Boris Johnson in the front in 2016. This week, of course, Boris Johnson got his, or 2 weeks ago, Boris Johnson's got his revenge, sacking Mr Gove from the cabinet. Mr Gove has now been sacked from his cabinet job by the last 3 Conservative prime ministers, so he's paid the price. But no, it's nothing new. Come on, get over it.
Absolutely brilliant, John. Thank you so much for the little trip down memory lane, journey through the skullduggery of these contests. John Craig there in Downing Street. Now, today, Liz Truss eased Penny Mordaunt out of the contest and moved into second place with 113 votes from Conservative MPs. The former leader, Iain Duncan Smith, has been one of the Foreign Secretary's biggest supporters throughout the campaign. I caught up with him a bit earlier in Central Lobby and started by asking if it was always going to end up being Rishi Sunak versus Liz Truss.
It was always a tough fight between the three of them, and Penny, she did very well. But yeah, I always felt that Liz would get into the final round. I didn't think she had to win it, but she needed to get into the final round.
And now is she the front runner? I mean, if you look at the UCA polling, if you look at the Con Home polling, she's more popular with the members.
I think that's the case. I think what's happened over the last few weeks is she's been able to come out from just being a government person, suddenly being herself. And I thought the last debate that they had on the Sunday night, where she really went for the Chancellor and took him on, showed she's got steel, she's got real metal, and she knows what she's doing. And I think there's a sense now amongst some of the membership too that they're concerned about the way Boris was dispatched, and they're also worried about those that did it. So there's an element of that in there as well.
So Rishi Sunak, you think, there?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's up to Rishi how he runs his campaign, and I like Rishi a lot. But I think Liz stayed in post, did her job. I've had lots of comments back from my association, and didn't abandon it in the time of a war. So but lots of people wanted Boris out, so I mean, you get a mix of it, but I do sense there's a certain amount of concern about the way Boris left.
I mean, that feels to me like quite a criticism of Rishi Sunak, that he abandoned at the time of a war. You talk about Ukraine.
Well, I'm only relating what they said. I don't say that's the killing thing. I think, you know, the fact is they'll be judged on their economic policy, on what they think about the Ukraine war, about China's going to be a big issue too. You know, well, how do you deal with China? Should we be doing what the Treasury want, economic trade deals or not? All this stuff will be in the mix, but you know, members will make their decision about who they thought did the right thing, and we'll see how that goes. But I do think Liz has got a connection now with the membership.
We talk about the members, but should we also be talking about the electorate? Because look, this is, you know, not just a contest to be Conservative Party leader, but also Prime Minister. And Rishi Sunak is more popular than Liz Truss if you look at the polls of the general public. And also Boris Johnson might be popular with the membership, but polling with the general public's a bit more mixed.
When you go to the wider public, most of the wider public know one or two people in government reasonably well. Chancellor always well, the Prime Minister always well.
She's a Foreign Secretary.
She is.
She's not like a lowly backbencher.
The word is Foreign Secretary, which means she's away from the country a lot and doesn't get out into the country as much as some of the others. So what you'll see now over the campaign as it goes out to the country is more and more people who are not members will watch, see what's going on, get to know who people are. Already when it first started, she was well below, but she's come up a long way. And originally, the members were in favour of others, but now they're in favour of her. So you can see that exposure on these sort of memes, etc., does help people get to know who they are.
She hasn't done a single broadcast interview. Do you think that needs to change?
I think she's right not to have done broadcast. This is about the members. Now we're through with the members. Now she'll do broadcast interviews because she's going to the country. So that's important. Not to do too many too early, but to do them on the right time. So
and debates.
Well, there'll be debates, I'm sure. But also, I guess, you'll be seeing her on things like this.
Yeah. There's been the tone of the debate I want to talk to you about a bit, because obviously the Conservative Party needs to survive afterwards. Keir Starmer at Prime Minister's Questions effectively just reading out a list of things that candidates have said, including Liz Truss, about Rishi Sunak's economic record. Are you worried that she's gone in studs up against the Chancellor?
No, not really. Again, I may sound complacent about it, but every leadership campaign I've either been involved in, and I've been 7, run 2, won 1. So I know that almost all of them end up being quite fierce, because this is the biggest and most important job in Britain, and it's also going to decide whether we win or lose the next election will be the person in charge. So there's going to be edge, there's going to be tightness. It's not like Labour versus Conservative, where there's a really big gap. This is really about two Conservatives who kind of agree in general terms about what should happen, but pace of change, you know, when should tax cuts come in, how much should they be, what do you do with levies, all these things are debates in detail, and that's what's going to be.
There is a big difference between Rishi Sunak's economic plan and Liz Truss's economic plan. She's criticised the Chancellor's economic plan. You have as well. You talked about its failure to get inflation under control, for example, as well. So there is a big choice on the economy.
There is going to be a choice, and choice is important because we have two views about where we are and two views about where we need to get to. So I would think all candidates want to get us to a place where we have growth. The question is, do you think it should happen now, or do you think you want to put it on? My answer is Liz is right. We have the headroom to do these reductions in tax. It's the only way we can help those on low income. You know, people paying marginal rates of tax that have now been frozen, people that are on low income tax, the bottom rate, they're all suffering.
Rishi Sunak says it's fantasy economics.
Well, I've heard people say to Ronald Reagan, I remember, that he was practicing voodoo economics. but he turned America around. I remember people saying about Margaret Thatcher that she didn't understand economics, that her plan to get the economy growing wouldn't work. And she won endless elections because
Do you think
she
that's
delivered.
happening with Liz Truss? A bit patronising.
I think you be careful what you say when you say to somebody it's fantasy land. It's not fantasy land. This is what people want. This is what they need. We simply cannot afford, we cannot afford to have high taxes and high interest rates. We will crush the economy. So growth is critical. This is where I disagree with the Treasury orthodoxy. Treasury has been wrong on so many occasions when it looks ahead into the future. It seems to have an inability to understand what people need. Politicians are there to do that. Liz is right. We need to keep growth going. We need to get the burdens down on people so they can get through this spike in cost of living.
Iain Duncan Smith, one of the most vocal supporters of Liz Truss. A little bit later, we're going to get Labour's take on all of this with the party's deputy leader, Angela Rayner. But just before we do, let's speak to our deputy political editor, Sam Coates, shall we? So what I guess most people want to know is, right, we've got the final two now. Who is starting the next phase of the race out in front?
Well, the answer to that question hurts your head, because through so many rounds of MP voting, all 5 rounds, Rishi Sunak was the man to beat. He had the highest number of MPs in the tally. But now everything has changed, and Liz Truss facing Rishi Sunak. Well, the members' polling suggests that, according to the polling done by YouGov of Tory members on Monday and Tuesday, Rishi Sunak would lose to Liz Truss by a margin of 54 to 35. So a big difference, almost a double-digit difference between the two candidates, suggesting at this stage that Rishi Sunak really has a fight on his hands. Quite interesting tonight that he's put out this video saying that he is behind in this race. That's quite an admission, given where he was coming from just before. So I think that's why both candidates are going to go big on the differences between them.
Big on the differences between them. Does that mean, in other words, that we're going to see a pretty feisty, fiery, bitter debate?
As we've been saying all along, I think this is going to come down to 3 areas: personality, tax and Brexit, and I'd expect pretty combustible clashes between the two, including on the new Sky News debate on Thursday, August the 4th at 8 o'clock with Kay Burley, but all the way through the debate between those two, because Rishi Sunak's job is not only to say that he would beat Keir Starmer, but his version of the kind of change that the country needs is to project the image of somebody who's going to return a bit of stability and a bit of integrity to the way that government is run. Liz Truss's pitch is that you need something of a big bang. Tax cuts, doesn't matter so much if we borrow a bit more in the short term. Boldness, again, on Brexit being another part of her solution. Now, it has to be said, at this point of a cost of living crisis, risk-taking with Liz Truss might ward off some of the membership, but her tax-cutting vision might prove attractive. A calmer, more sensible government might attract some of the Conservative membership, but perhaps there aren't enough solutions to people's everyday problems for others. So I think there's all to play for in this race. It remains so complicated. There have been so many twists and turns to this point that we just don't know quite where it's going to end up in early September.
Yeah, this is it. It's been so unpredictable, hasn't it? And I feel like there may be some twists to come as we roll through the summer. Sam, thank you very much for your analysis. We'll have more from Sam later on the programme. Now, the prospect of the former Chancellor Rishi Sunak and the current Foreign Secretary spending the next 6 weeks tearing chunks out of each other over the government's record must seem quite appealing to the Labour Party. The opposition now has consistent leads in the polls. Soon the leader Keir Starmer is going to have a new opposite number to face at the next election. Well, I spoke to the Deputy Leader, Angela Rayner, a little earlier. I started by asking her who should be more worried about fighting at an election. So who would you be most worried about fighting at a general election? Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss?
Neither of them. They've both been stooges in Boris Johnson's government. They've both voted for the tax hikes that people have seen. They've both created this cost of living crisis and propped up a Prime Minister that is engulfed in sleaze, lies and partying while people are in lockdown. So I would relish the thought of going head-to-head with either one of them. I think they're both just as complicit. This is the continuation of what's happened in Downing Street and what's been happening with this government for a long time now, and it shows they've got no new ideas and they've they've not got the future of the country at hand.
Well, I guess, Rishi Sunak would say that he resigned from Boris Johnson's government. Liz Truss would say that she's promising a different economic policy. It's not completely continuity, Boris, is it?
Well, it'll be interesting to see how they try and move away from that over the summer. But, Rishi Sunak was the Chancellor who did put the tax hikes up, and Liz Truss did support it and did vote for it at the time. And, Rishi did stay in the government for a very long time, knowing full well he was in number 11. If my neighbours were having a party, I think I'd have known about it. In fact, he was fined himself for a fixed penalty notice. I think they're both just as disastrous, and it is continuation of the same old, maybe not Boris Johnson, but the same old Conservative Party and what they've been trying to get away with.
So you say you wouldn't be frightened about fighting either of them in an election. You told LBC that Boris Johnson had a magic where he was able to get through to the public. So do you think he was more of an electoral threat for Labour than either of these two?
Well, he clearly was, because in 2019, Labour suffered a significant defeat, and that was because Boris Johnson promised the electorate something, and he did have something that the electorate connected to.
Do you think these two have something the electorate
No, and this is the problem. The problem what Boris Johnson did is he broke that trust with the electorate. After getting that 80-seat majority, he broke the trust. The two now propped him up after the public had seen that Boris Johnson had squandered that victory that he had, lied to the British public, put taxes up, not dealt with the issues that they're facing at the moment with the cost of living crisis. And the two contenders now were part of that government, and they don't have that connection with the public, I don't believe. And I think the public have had enough of the Conservative Party, because they've seen, even in this leadership contest, they've been fighting each other and trying to distance themselves from decisions that they've been part of.
If they do distance themselves from the last government and promise a new agenda, do you think that actually they have a mandate to carry it out, or do you think they should re-seek a mandate through an election?
I think they should re-seek a mandate. I think the general public are very angry. We saw that with the by-election results recently. The public are very angry with the Conservative Party. The problem started with when Boris Johnson broke the trust with the British people. And then because of people like Rishi and Liz, who propped him up in the cabinet, allowed that to continue, the rot to continue. It has now stained the whole of the Conservative Party. So I don't actually think that they would get a mandate from the British public now, because they've failed so spectacularly in doing what the British public asked them to do.
Whatever happens, the Conservative Party is either about to elect the first ever non-white Prime Minister or the third female Prime Minister, all of whom have been Conservative. That's a bit embarrassing for the Labour Party, isn't it?
Well, we will get there. We have got our leader at the moment. I'm the deputy.
That's what I've heard every time, every contest.
I'm the deputy leader of our party, which means if we get into government, I'll be the deputy prime minister, working class girl from the north.
It's not quite the same as the prime minister, though, is it?
Oh, it matters a lot, and it will make a big difference. And I think the Labour Party, come the next leadership election, I'm pretty certain we've got some magnificent talent in our party, and I think that we'll be able to showcase that come the next leadership election. But the leader we've got
a bit, though, mustn't it? That the Conservative Party have done better than you when it comes to the equality and diversity.
Diversity matters, sure. Diversity matters in terms of where people are from, etc. But diversity in terms of ideas matters as well. And at the moment, we're getting the same old policies and the same old ideas and the same old sleaze from the Conservatives at the moment. They haven't addressed the issues that people are facing, like the cost of living. Actually, most people will say, yes, diversity matters and it's great. However, if you're offering the same things and you're not actually making a difference to my life in the way I want them to, that matters more. And I think we can show that the Labour Party has changed since me and Keir took over, and that we can show that we've got a programme that can get us into government and change people's lives for the better.
You touched a bit about your own background there. You grew up in Stockport, you were a carer for your mum, you had a baby at 16. It is quite a different path from, the sort of well-trodden PPE at Oxford. Do you think that people underestimate you sometimes in Parliament?
People have underestimated me all my life, if I'm honest, and I remember the stigma that I faced when I was a young mum at 16, and it still burns now, and that's why I'm so passionate about giving people opportunity and not, some of the rhetoric that we've heard from Conservative ministers around, we'll just work a little bit harder. The problem with you being on low pay is you just need to get a better job. Actually, I find that quite offensive, because when I was a low-paid worker, I was a casual worker, zero-hour contract care worker, and I was a young mum, I struggled then, and it was nowhere near as bad as the cost of living for those people today. And it's not about them not wanting to work harder. I think it's the Conservative Party are really out of touch with how people are really struggling today. People in work are really struggling and are frightened about what's going to happen come October when it's winter and their bills go up again and their cost of living and their food prices are going up. People are really struggling and not hearing from the Conservatives what they're going to do to challenge that.
What kind of stigma? You mentioned the stigma that you faced.
Oh, it's just like, oh, she speaks with an accent, she must be thick. I'll probably get that again after being on your show, unfortunately. I'm working class, so therefore, you know, we're not as good. If a posh guy from a private school walks in a room, he automatically gains respect. Oh, he's got a status. If I walk in a room, I have to earn the respect because people look at me and look at me differently. And that's how society is, unfortunately. It's not unique for me. Many women and many working class people face those challenges as well. Many people from, many people of colour face the same level of discrimination as well. And it is a product of society, unfortunately. And we've got to change that. That's why I won't change the way I speak. That's why I talk about my background. It's because we can do better. And actually, the general public, when they see more of that, and they see people in positions of power making a difference and really holding their own, then it changes that perception.
I was quite struck when you went toe-to-toe with Dominic Raab recently at Deputy Prime Minister's Questions. He said, she talks about working people. Where was the Right Honourable Lady when the comrades were on the picket line last Thursday? She was at the Glyndebourne Music Festival, sipping champagne and listening to opera. Do you think that's a kind of snobbery in itself?
Well, it is a snobbery in itself, actually. You know, I've always fought for workers all my life, and everyone knows that. My record is very clear on that, and I think the government have really failed to tackle some of the issues. They're in power and have really failed to tackle the issues that we face at the moment with endemic low pay for workers. Of course, they're angry, and they have my full support with that. But the idea that a working-class person can't go to the opera, when actually I was there to visit a working-class friend of mine who plays violin at the opera and has played violin there for 36 years and was proud to be there. I think that shows how out of touch he is. Actually, working class people can enjoy opera and should be able to go there. And in fact, the tickets to go to the opera were a lot cheaper than the tickets to go to Glastonbury. But hey, I wonder whether I'd have got the same stigma if I'd have been seen raving at Glastonbury.
Briefly, on that same outing, Dominic Raab winked, right? I think actually you might better show the photo of him winking. Now, I asked him about this. He said he wasn't winking at you, he was winking at Iain Murray. Do you believe him?
I think he was winking at himself. I think he thought he did a really good job. It was really weird. Me and Rachel looked at each other and said, that was weird. It was just a very weird thing to do.
And just finally, now I know I'm going to ask this question. You're going to be studiously loyal to Keir Starmer. You're going to say that he is the person you want to see as the next Prime Minister. So we can just take that as a given. Mm-hmm. But do you think you've got what it takes to be Prime Minister?
Oh, do you know, I say this all the time. When originally I used to think there's no way that I could be Prime Minister of this country. The fact that I got into Parliament, it's such an honour to represent my constituency of Ashton Line. But since Boris Johnson has done it, I thought he set the bar so low that I actually think even Terry from the local pub could do a better job than what Boris Johnson has done. But actually, we need standards in public life.
So what's the answer then to this?
Yes, question? I think I could do it now. I think I could. And actually, I think it's really important that kids from my background do have that aspiration and think, you know what, you can do it. And I was guilty of thinking I couldn't do it because for all other reasons. I think there's always someone better than myself. And actually, I think on your show, speaking to people from my background, I should say, you could do whatever you want.
Would you like
put your mind to it.
Fancy it?
I think it would be really daunting, you know. If I can't go to the opera, then God help me if I became Prime Minister.
OK. Thank you very much, Angela Rayner, there. Well, there you go, straight answer. She thinks that she could do it, become Prime Minister. A little later tonight, we're going to have a new edition of the Sky News Daily podcast with Neil Patterson, which you can subscribe to by scanning the QR code on the screen now. And Neil and our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, are going to have all the reaction from Westminster, and they'll look at what both Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak stand for. So a really interesting podcast today. You can subscribe to it for free wherever you get your podcasts. Well, a pretty busy day in Westminster. I'm really looking forward to seeing what our viewers panel make of it all. Who do they want to win? Our Conservative voters panel. Do they want Rishi Sunak or do they want Liz Truss?
I'm Yvan Bourgnon. I'm a sailor. I spent half time of my life on the sea. We have a factory who can convert this plastic to energy. And so after, at the end, we can minimize the footprint carbon of the boat.
Hello, welcome back live to Westminster. You're watching The Take on another really big day in politics. We now, of course, know it is going to be Rishi Sunak versus Liz Truss, who are going to battle it out to be the next Conservative Party leader and, of course, the next Prime Minister too. Now, it's up to party members to decide. We're going to have a new PM by September the 5th. So I'm excited to find out what our panel of Conservative voters make of the two candidates. Now, I have to say, because I would be wondering this if I was watching at home, we have got an all-male panel tonight. It was not supposed to be this way. Our female panellist in Cumbria had her broadband drop out. So I think that says it all, perhaps, when it comes to rural broadband. But we have a fantastic panel for you. I'm excited to know everyone's thoughts on the last two people. Now, I want to go to John first, John Comerford, who is in Kent. Now, John, I want to talk to you because the last time we spoke, you said you've always voted Conservative your whole life, but you're so disillusioned with Boris Johnson that you couldn't bring yourself to vote for him. Do you feel the same about Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, or differently?
I think that there was an opportunity that has been lost because Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss have kept Boris Johnson in power, whatever misdemeanors he's done over the extended period of time. That said, I will vote for whichever one wins the election.
Really interesting.
Sorry.
OK, and what did you make of Boris?
Sorry.
Sorry, apologies. And what did you make of Boris Johnson's last Prime Minister's questions?
It was, to me, like an end-of-term banter, and I don't think any question. I think Keir Starmer appeared to have little conviction and just going through the motions. I got that sort of impression the whole of the PMQs today.
Thank you very much, John. Really interesting to talk today. Well, let's go to Roy, shall we? Roy Royer from Kent. You had a few choice words about Rishi Sunak when my producer spoke to you earlier. What do you make of the two candidates still in it?
Well, I think the absolute requirement for anybody who aspires to be to have an office in government is to be loyal to that government or to be loyal to that state, certainly. And I think Rishi Sunak's choosing to apply and, in fact, hold a green card left a very, very sour taste in my mouth. I'm not sure where his loyalties would lie in respect of Great Britain should he be elected. He was on manoeuvres against Boris Johnson, and fair enough, that's politics. But I think the green card issue was the main thing that he's just lost it for me. I have absolutely no respect for him anymore as a result of that. Liz Truss, she was really not much in my mind over the last few years. I think in the Foreign Office she did quite well. And I think on the whole Ukrainian issue, she showed a different side to her character. So I'm interested to see what more she can bring. But as far as Rishi, it's either Liz or none at all for me.
Wow, there you go. So some pretty stark views about the two people left in it. Let's bring in Vic Daniels, shall we, joining us from London. What do you make of the final two?
I think they're both decent candidates, both got experience. I'm not particularly a Rishi fan. I didn't like the way he resigned in a fairly opportunistic way a couple of weeks ago. I don't like the fact that he's risen taxes, increased taxation 15 times. And I also think that, unlike Angela Rayner, he's not real. He's too rich. And I don't think he can relate to a common man. Having said that, I'd probably vote for him if I had a vote, because I think he's had experience as Chancellor. That experience will be very relevant because the next 2 years it's all going to be about fiscal and finance. And I think that I think that Liz Truss, I just think that he's a man with the right experience, and reluctantly I'd hold my nose, but I'd vote for him.
You mentioned the Angela Rayner there, and I know that you probably heard the interview I just did with her. As you're a Conservative voter, but what do you make of her as a politician? Do you think she could tempt you to switch over, or do you think she's a formidable opponent?
Look, I'm an East End boy, so I can relate to Angela Rayner. I think that, she's passionate, she's got fire, and she's real. I don't agree with her political views, but I totally respect her as an individual. And it would be great for this country in some ways if she was given that opportunity.
That's really interesting. So you think she'd be a more formidable opponent than Keir Starmer for the Conservatives then?
100%.
Interesting stuff. Right, let's bring in Paul now, shall we? Paul Blom from North West London. Now, you were a Tom Tugendhat fan, weren't you? So were you a bit disappointed to see him not go through?
Yes, I was, very much so. But I think he actually ran a very poor campaign in the leadership election. But interestingly, I heard today that Chris Bryant has said that Tom Tugendhat was the candidate that Labour would most fear, which I thought was quite a good insight into perhaps the candidates.
And of the final two, Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, who do you find most appealing?
Well, I've warmed to Rishi Sunak, really. I tend to agree with his views on tax. I think he's been, Chancellor during the pandemic, so he must know what's happening in the economy, and I kind of do go along with him with his views on what we need to do to try and help the cost of living crisis that we're in. I'm not sure Liz Truss's ideas are really going to help, and I think Rishi Sunak probably has got a better insight into what we should be doing. Having said that, I'm not sure how the general electorate will consider Rishi Sunak as an authentic character. I think Liz Truss is perhaps more relatable to the wider electorate in the country, I think.
Interesting stuff. Well, let's bring in Rob Tyler, shall we? Are you joining us from Bolton? And Rob, I thought you made quite an interesting point when you spoke to my producer earlier. You said, my heart is with Truss, but my mind is with Rishi. What did you mean by that?
Well, I think that when we look at Liz Truss's way forward, she's looking at really spending a way forward. And letting the deficit take the strain, whereas Richie's going to be more constrained and try and get us out of our financial situation before he looks to have any real tax cuts and helping for the people. For me, that's the way forward, but I would like to see the people get a little bit, and so maybe this would get my vote.
Right, now, I'm going to ask all of you a question, OK? I would like to get, it's a straw poll, obviously. If you would like to see Rishi Sunak win over Liz Truss, I would like you to raise your hand. So if you prefer Rishi Sunak to Liz Truss, put your hand up now. Right, that's 3 out of our 5. And if you are a Liz Truss fan over Rishi Sunak, put your hand up now. 2, a reluctant second one, I thought, just going up there. Right, so it's quite split, isn't it? Relatively evenly split with our panel. Rishi Sunak just squeezing it. Roy, you were quite slow to put up your hand. I'm not sure if that's because you were just thinking about it, or was there a bit of reluctance?
No, it's just a lag on the internet. It's nothing. Try not to make too much out of it, Sophie. Yeah.
Amazing. This is what I love about live TV.
It's not Sunday morning now. It's not Sunday morning now.
I thought you were just like weighing up the options, trying to work out what was going on. Okay, and my final question, Trevor, we had Boris Johnson's last PMQs today. If you think Boris Johnson would be more likely to win an election and should have stayed on as leader compared to the 2 that we've got now, Put up your hands if you prefer to have Boris Johnson still there. There you go, 3 of you would. And if you're pleased that Boris Johnson's left and you think we might be getting a clean start with Rishi or Liz Truss, raise your hand. So that's 2. Again, quite split. Really interesting to talk. And it does, I think, show how everything is all to play for. Just, you know, a small straw poll, of course, not anything scientific, but really interesting to hear people's takes on the battle between Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss. You are watching The Take. We're live in Westminster for you this evening. Up next, we're going to round up everything we've just heard, do a bit of end-of-term analysis, not just post-match, but end-of-term with Sam Coates, so stay with us.
The inspiration behind our product came from understanding how big of a problem livestock methane emissions were.
We support communities to grow food in lost and unloved spaces across the city. So our main kind of driving force is to get people growing.
Hello, welcome back live to Westminster. You are watching The Take. Well, we've had lots of takes this evening after an absolutely extraordinary period of British politics. So we have a bit of final end-of-term analysis with our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, who joins us now. It's felt like we've had politics on fast forward for the last few weeks, but worth taking a moment. Boris Johnson's final PMQs as Prime Minister. Now we know the 2 people who want to take over that job. And of course, it's worth reflecting, they're not just going to be leader of the Conservative Party, but Prime Minister.
That's right. And I have to say, politics has been on fast forward for the last few weeks, but in my view, really since September 2014, when there was the Scottish referendum, and certainly since June 2016, the Brexit referendum. Big questions about Britain unsettled. That's one of the reasons behind the fact that we've ended up changing Prime Minister today. Now, Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss are going to give everything they have over the next few weeks to try and succeed Boris Johnson. But I just thought it would be useful to try and fast forward 6 months and imagine at the end of it what that might look like, because the challenges that they face are immense. Take just one, energy. Now, we all know bills are going up, additional amounts on our bills to be announced at the end of August, even before the end of the contest. Officials are even talking about what to happen if there's a cold winter and whether we can all keep the lights on every day of the week, every week. Incredible to think of, but that's a consequence of the situation that we're in. Then there is inflation. Just today, you had pay rises of just under 5% for a lot of public sector bodies. You had inflation of over 9%. And what does that mean? Well, that means industrial action. Quite a lot of the different bodies representing different bits of the public sector saying that they're going to go out on strike. Again, that's going to hit whichever of Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss become Prime Minister. And then within months, there are going to be potentially some very difficult choices around Ukraine. That has really got bogged down. It's so telling that this isn't an issue that we're talking about day in, day out at the moment. It's not necessarily going the way that everyone in the West would want. How are people going to deal with Vladimir Putin and what he is doing in Ukraine? Then we get on to Brexit and the Northern Ireland Protocol. One of the biggest gambles, Liz Truss in favour of really facing down the EU. Rishi Sunak, a bit more cautious. Is Liz Truss willing to have a full-on confrontation that could take us all the way through to tariffs, which will cost the UK economy more if the confrontation goes all the way to the wire? And finally, this woman, Nicola Sturgeon, has promised a referendum in 2023, so that's next year. Can she follow through on that? What will happen with that? Those are the kind of things that the new Prime Minister will have to confront. Now, Boris Johnson looked very much to me in the Commons chamber like he didn't think that he should be going. It was a gritted teeth performance. He told his successor to look in the back mirror at the people behind him and stabbed him in the back. He blamed the Treasury, coded jab at Rishi Sunak. He thinks he should be staying. The interesting thing for Conservative MPs is whether they start to agree with him as the months go on.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how those two people manage to cope with the whole menu of big things that they need to sort out that you just taken us through.
All with their successor somewhere in the background.
Yeah, I can imagine he's not going to be the easiest backseat driver as well. Sam, thank you very much. Always good to hear your analysis. Well, that is it for The Take. Normally, at this stage, I say we're going to be back next week, but actually we won't, because it is now summer recess, and that means a little break for The Take. It has been an absolute pleasure to launch the show here on Wednesday nights. What a time in politics we are having. But we will be back when we know, of course, how the leadership contest is going. It's going to be a really interesting summer. Thank you very much for watching. We'll be back in September. Looking forward to it.
The inspiration behind our product came from understanding how big of a problem livestock methane emissions were.
I'm Iain Duncan, I'm a sailor. I spent half time of my life on the sea. We have a factory who can convert this plastic to energy. And so after, at the end, we can minimize the footprint carbon of the boat.